Wow, guys. Clocking in at another day in the factory. Another day in the god factory. Ugh. Listen, I'm a few days away from beating this god game and being done with it, okay? Do you know the cell theme on YouTube is not the original? I feel like I've been lied to for years. There is like a whole different OST for Dragon Ball Z. I don't know if it was just a language thing or why they used one sometimes and the other times. I don't know why, but... Do you still consider Sam Seder an ally like Mehdi Hassan, or is he way too far gone now? I don't know. I guess we're about to find out, because apparently the debate with Ezra Klein is just disastrous. You gonna play more video games after beating Factorio? No. We might do a small pit stop into Dune or something. Or not Doom, but it's probably just gonna be back to the politicking. What airline did you fly on last night? If it was JetBlue, it's not surprising you had a disruptive passenger. Wait, why would that not be surprising? I feel like JetBlue is a tad more expensive than ordinary.
What do you think? First off, she didn't pay for my mom's mortgage. The was gambling money. Gambling money. Stop saying that. The was gambling money, and guess who earned that? Right, because of the 21 fucking gambler. Who earned that?
Can we watch the movie?
I have no idea what the fuck you just said. What class do you fly?
What do you think? First off,
I usually do. If I'm gonna shortchange my sleep, now I've said fuck it and I'll fly first class. But otherwise, I usually just fly comfort or main plus. I don't know what the fuck the point of this was. Absolute fucking pussies. Tide
like they'll eat like the whole.
Oh. God damn.
You know, some people they'll eat like the whole Oreo, and then other times they twist them, and then they like eat the frost.
Okay, music is way too loud on this, so way to go, whoever edited this.
First, because everybody has like their own process. I'm curious for you.
Actually, I can't even listen. Now it's ruined. Okay, we can't see. Good. Use your mind. I will be stealing that. Comey posted like some seashells or some shit, and they spelled out like 8647, and conservatives like 8647, 86 something means to kill it. Is it threatening against the president? Is it threatening the president? It's like it's actually unhinged. How? Oh my god. Shouldn't Trump reject the plane from Qatar on principle? I feel like the last time the Middle East donated planes to the US didn't go well. Good one. But also, what do you mean? No. People sometimes just give $500 million gifts. Yikes. Like, I saw a super yikes Hillary Clinton tweet about this. She needs to just step back and leave room for the real warriors like Bernie Sanders. No one gives someone a $400 million jet for free without expecting anything in return. Be serious. Maybe they just didn't like you enough to give you a $400 million jet. You ever think of that? Maybe you weren't respected enough. Ha! 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 Is that phrase equating the abundance movement with some totally unrelated thing just because the word abundance is being used? Yeah, I would expect her to do whatever she can to attack the abundance movement, because when she was on Ezra Klein, she got blown the fuck out. Blown the fuck out. Blown the fuck out. Good memes. Sorry, okay. Oh shit, okay. That's what I'd like to see. Is this Grok shit real? That he's just like randomly throwing in South African genocide on random fucking things?
You know, some people they'll eat like.
Why'd you link me the same thing? I don't care. The music's too loud. Oh, we got this Noah Samson video too. We'll watch that today. Wait, does Ryan Macbeth think this was a good idea?
There's one path forward that needs to happen. I think that Democrats that are benefiting from Democratic policies or from Democratic successes need to start cutting off Republicans from.
Damn. True, though.
Part of the argument is here.
Do you have any idea how hard it is to maintain this hairstyle? Have you ever heard Ben Shapiro sing before?
Meanwhile, President Trump was in Qatar yesterday, and President Trump did some good things. Like, for example, he cut a deal with Qatar, apparently to generate $1.2 trillion in economic exchange, according to the White House in a fact sheet. That agreement includes a $96 billion deal with Qatar Airways to buy up to 210 Boeing 787 Dreamliners and 777X airplanes with GE Aerospace engines, according to the fact sheet. Also, a statement of intent.
What were you doing for the last 2 days? Yesterday I was in New York. I did, there's a guy called Nate somebody that does YouTube videos. He gets like 500,000 per video, even though he doesn't have the most subs. And I had a one-on-one debate with a guy named Kaizen. Who's, I guess he describes himself as a centrist. But it was okay. I was supposed to be in and out in like 10 hours. Like I left here at 12:30, or my flight left here at 12:30, and I was supposed to be back at midnight. But my flight ended up being delayed like 3 hours last night.
That would lead to $38 billion in investment. And so they did. Ali arrives in Agrabah. They brought out the golden peacocks and everything. Here's what it looked like.
Oh yeah, that guy. That's Kaizen on Twitter.
He's got 75 golden camels. Purple peacocks, he's got 53. Yeah, that's what it was in Qatar. President Trump loves that kind of stuff.
Why am I... Don't all Jews sing? Isn't it part of, Do they have to sing their prayers? Or am I making that up? For like your bar mitzvah thing? Or for in temple ordinarily? I don't know if you do or not. I'm not sure actually. I'm risking it all and asking Destiny, any update on the Jan 6 or Israel footage project? August has it all, okay. Bug him for it. Give us your driving take on this accident. Have you heard about Adriana Smith, the brain-dead woman who's being kept alive to continue a pregnancy? No, but that sounds like a House episode. Jesus. Whose fault is this?
Oh, no.
I did just catch that on...
Why is this California? I'm curious where these people are. Oh, Beverly Hills Hotel. Because I was going to say, in California, you fight for your life on those left turns. You fight for your life in the left turn lane, okay? Let me explain what I mean when I say that, all right? You have to, or the person behind you will get out and kill you, okay? As they should, rightfully. If you are, if you're turning left here, if this light has if the yellow part of the light is even still slightly glowing from when it was lit last, you have an obligation to get at least one wheel out into the intersection. And as long as you're one wheel out, then you're 10 toes down. As long as you've got one wheel in this intersection, that means that you are part of the official line of cars that is now in the middle of the fucking street, blocking everything, which will fuck it all up. It's kind of memey. If you're actually driving, at least in Southern California, typically, if you've got two people sitting at a lane, I think they call this a California left, actually. If the light turns red or whatever, then two people go instead of one. I think in most states, one person will go. In California, two people will go. It looks, though, like this guy wasn't trying to turn left. It looks like he was trying to make a U-turn. I can't tell. I don't know exactly what's going on here. Actually, I think I know what's going on. It's just hard to say because the filmer wasn't capturing enough. I think that I have limited information. It looks like what's happening is it looks like this is a left turn lane, and it looks like this guy's trying to make a U-turn in this lane. And it looks like he thinks he has clearance, but I think this car is blocking his line of sight. So when it starts to go, he might be assuming that he's safe because he's basically blocking, so he thinks he's got the room to do it. But there's another car coming that he just can't see. That's my guess, but it's hard because I can't tell. I can't see, obviously. Like this car that hit him, maybe they had actually plenty of warning. They could have seen him and they could have slowed down easily. Or maybe this guy creeped right out from behind the other car and there's no way this guy would have stopped in time. The fact that he starts to turn and then stops shows me that at least at this point he can see him, but it looks like he sees him very late, right? Like the brake goes on here and the guy's already basically hit him, so. Why do Americans barely use roundabouts? It's strange because the big negative for roundabouts is not great for walking, but it's American. You don't give a shit about pedestrians already. I don't know when they invented roundabouts, but in the United States, one issue with roundabouts is they take a little bit more space. And so it's hard, I think, to retrofit an intersection for a roundabout, number one. Number two, Americans very rarely see roundabouts. And in the places that we do have them, it's basically a deathmatch free-for-all. Like, if you're at a roundabout, let's say that you're at a roundabout here. If you're entering the roundabout right here and you see an American pull up to a roundabout right here, you have to be very careful because there's a good 15 to 25% chance that he's about to turn left into the roundabout to go this way. So it's just very, you got to be very careful. Why? They think they're in the UK? No, Americans just don't always understand the concept of like going around the roundabout to go straight here. Good one, though.
More with the...
Ezra kept insisting profit motive is not the biggest issue. Well, yeah, like I said, like this is just another liberal hack rebranding meant to direct attention away from any critique of capitalism and towards some new innovative bullshit real
is Welsh on his harder lefty arc again?
Capitalism hasn't been tried. Direct your attention away from the actual sources of our woes. Pay no mind to the enormous increase in wealth inequality or the fact that overwhelmingly all the harms, ills, inequalities in society are being caused by the gulf in class interest between people who own and have wealth and people who don't. Make sure to exclude the left. They're always so fucking snide in their descriptions. It's incredible. It's like Klein, Iglesias, they all have the same tone. This snide, sniveling...
Not like leftists, of course, who are just compassionate and understanding.
Sneering, to use another S word, attitude where they, despite often being like very wrong, right? Like tripping over themselves quite often, being on the wrong side of a bunch of obvious predictions, they then get really fucking smug and act as though the left is the one that can't properly understand the issue. Yeah, like they're the only adults in the room, except they've been talking about politics publicly for 15 years or more, and they haven't figured out that capitalism's the problem yet. I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, especially in this environment, man, I feel like the average, like, know-nothing, lumpenprole, liberal Democrat voter understands that capitalism is the issue more than these people whose job is being a smug counterexample to leftism.
Okay. All right, link me the thing. Oh, is it this? Why do these far leftists keep criticizing Ezra on points he's not advocating for? Because this is about ideology first and fact second. Ezra Klein, listen, I'm not trying to sound whatever, but Ezra Klein is basically pulling a destiny in the political online punditry world. He's basically coming in and he's saying, hey, here are some issues that we all agree need to be fixed. Let's take like an evidence-based approach to fixing them. Most people don't want to take an evidence-based approach to fixing these things. Most people take an ideology-based approach. When you're taking an ideology-based approach, when somebody suggests you do something, what you're checking for isn't that it actually effectuates some result that does something good. You're making sure that it effectuates some result that comports with your ideology, okay? Does that make sense? I don't just say random words. Sometimes I worry when I say things like this. People think I'm just like saying random shit. These are meaningful sentences. Okay. The goal is when you do a thing like rent control, you're not checking to see, does rent control make it so that more people are able to afford homes? What you're checking to see is, does rent control damage capital interest while furthering leftist interest? And whether or not it actually helps anybody at the end of the day is like a hopeful side effect, basically. At this point, it feels like liberals are in the minority now. It feels that way. I've got a lot of theories, I guess, that I say every now and then, but it feels that way just because it's what it is like on the online media environment. I don't think it's like that in the real world. In the real world, most of the left is still, like 80, 90% is still liberals. Would an average American survive this roundabout? The thing about European roundabouts is that you have two things that make it in Europe so nobody dies in car accidents, okay? One is that all of your speed limits are like 40 kilometers an hour. And then two is there are giant blue arrows that point everywhere where you're allowed to drive. As long as you follow the blue arrows and the speed limits, you're probably always going to be okay-ish.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. It's a pleasure to welcome. Back, I guess. I mean, maybe it was years and years ago.
Been a minute.
Ezra Klein, New York Times columnist, host of the podcast, The Ezra Klein Show, also co-author of the new book, Abundance. Ezra, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So we should say just a little bit of backstory. You guys had reached out to us. Our efficiency is a quotient not particularly high, so you were on the Iglesias's show, I guess the Slow Boring podcast, and mentioned that we have
Matt Iglesias. Is that the one that I talked to? There are a couple leftist guys that all like occupy the same space in my mind. I think Iglesias is the one that I spoke to. Does anybody remember? No, in person. No Opinion I've spoken to a few times on stream. Not No Opinion. No, not the one I talked to on stream. The one I talked to in person in the studio. You guys, fuck you guys. Where are my fucking fans at right now? What the fuck? Matt Brunig. That was the one I spoke to. Okay, you're right. There you go.
Hadn't responded. So we wanted to have you on to talk about the book. We had Paul Glastis on from Washington Monthly, your old haunt.
Where I interned. Love Paul.
With a critique that was, I think, like a middling critique. Some of the proposals that were brought up in the book. But let's just start with you outlining, like, what thematically, what is the book about?
The book is about a very simple question.
I feel like you miss sometimes that the leftists also want better outcomes. They just only speak on the ideology, but the underpinning is more sophisticated in the primary texts. Yes, actually, you are correct. I'm moving contextually in a way that's not actually super fair. You are right. Technically, a leftist would want better outcomes. They would just say that the only way to achieve those best outcomes is to convert from a capitalist society to a socialist one first. So all of their goals are oriented towards moving in the socialist direction, even if that means temporarily worse conditions. That would be a more accurate way of saying that, I guess.
Which is, what do we need more of and how do we get it? And then the parts of the book that I think have aroused more controversy, critique, energy, conversation, is that much of the book is exploring the question of why in the places Democrats govern, or in the times when Democrats govern, are liberals, are Democrats, are in some cases people on the left, unable to produce more of the things we need. Why is there so little housing in California?
I was arguing in Straighter Age chat, and these people literally only settle with people if they agree to embrace Marxism. Well, I'm pretty sure Erin is a hardcore, like, leftist, like, socialist. Like, she's like an anti-capitalist, so that makes sense, yeah.
In some cases, people on the left, unable to produce more of the things we need. Why is there...
How does accelerationists versus reformists differ in how they view stuff? I don't believe there are real reformists. Socialists believe that like what happened with Lenin in the Russian Empire, socialists believe that capitalism, it can never be reformed into socialism, but that capitalism, through revolution, gives way to socialism. Capitalism is first required to create the productive resources in an economy necessary for the subsequent. There's a better word I'm looking for. The resulting socialist society will take advantage of the resources and the capital created by capitalism. But capitalism has to come first, and then the natural tension between labor and bourgeois owner class, right? The natural tension between those will eventually give way to revolution, which will give way to socialism.
Or in some cases, people on the left unable to produce more of the things we need. Why is there so little housing in California?
Do you think a good balance of capitalism and socialism would be a bad thing? You cannot have a balance of true capitalism and a balance of true socialism, because a socialist believes that capital, that private property, is intrinsically unethical. A true socialist wouldn't want capital to exist in a society, because from the socialist perspective, capitalists make their money through the unethical exploitation of labor. The only way that an owner can make money is by skimming profits from the work of another laborer, right?
Is people on the left unable to produce more of the things we need? Why is there so little housing in California and New York? Sam, where are you? Just so I have you
in New
geographically.
York.
You're in New York. So why in places like New York and California and Illinois, where you have a lot of democratic control, have they become very unaffordable? Why is it very hard to cite enough clean energy?
Okay, but you're not a true capitalist either. You like mixed modes. I think capitalism is flexible enough to allow for mixed modes. Like, a capitalist wouldn't say that a co-op is unethical. A capitalist would never say that. But a socialist would say that a private owner represents an unethical relationship.
Have they become very unaffordable? Why is it very hard to cite enough clean energy, even though that's become a major project for the Democratic Party? Why is so much that we do so goddamn slow? Medicare released its Medicare cards a year after it was passed into law. Getting prescription drug prices negotiated on 10 drugs took 3 years and will only go into effect this year, just in time for Donald Trump to take advantage of it and brag that it was him who did it.
In Yugoslavia, there was no revolution or reformation. The Communist Party came into power while fighting back Nazi Germany and just stayed in power to the war. Yeah, I just don't think that... I feel like socialism and communism is a political ideology masquerading as an economic ideology. That's what it feels like. I don't really have the historical background to be able to say that with any degree of certainty. But when people talk about socialism or communism, there's a great deal of economic thought that's baked into that, right? The labor theory of value, the concept of, inequality between rich and poor and how that impacts things. Like, politics is supposed to be downstream from Marxism or socialism. That's what it feels like, at least when I hear it. But when I look at it in practice, it seems heavily to be based on politics, that it's a political system, that Marxism, socialism, these are political systems, and then the resulting economies are just never really that good. So then it collapses into some sort of like vanguardish authoritarianism or something over and over and over again, is what seems to be the case. But what do I know?
So this question of the sclerosis of liberal government, how do we actually make it deliver the things it is promising to deliver, is the core inquiry of the book.
And the culprits run across...
Sorry, fuck, I keep pausing this. If you'd write a story about some ideal civilization, would it be more capitalist or socialist based? I'm a full-on capitalist, but I think the ideal situation itself would be socialism. Socialism nowadays, as we're moving more and more in this direction of Americans now who are leftists actually being socialists and not just big government people, socialism dictates that that the workers are also the owners. You don't have owners that aren't workers. That's like the crux. That's at its most simplest form, that's what socialism means. So I personally feel like this is another error in thinking, where anytime there's a winner, there also has to be a loser. So when a socialist looks at a capitalist making money, what the socialist is thinking is, oh, well, you have a revenue that is in excess of what you pay your employees and what you pay to maintain the capital. That excess, the difference between your cost and your revenue, is your profit. The only way the owner can make that profit is through the work of the laborer, working with the natural resources or the capital, right? So that exploitation is unethical because the owner is making something. But the problem is that, in my mind, a worker benefits and an owner benefits. The worker has the opportunity to work with capital that they wouldn't have access to otherwise to make more money than they would otherwise. And then the owner benefits by providing the capital and then making money off of the labor of the owner. I believe that you can have between worker and employee, between worker and owner, you have a mutually beneficial relationship basically. But mutually beneficial has been removed from most people's minds in a lot of different arenas. Like nothing can be mutually beneficial before. Everything has to be zero sum everywhere. The way that Donald Trump and everybody talks about immigration is another example of this. Everything is zero sum. There are winners and losers, and if somebody's winning, it means somebody has to be losing. It's very frustrating.
And the culprits run across, I guess, like four sort of main silos, as far as I can tell. Like we have the regulation and bureaucratic red tape, and this is a problem both in terms of like building infrastructure and to some extent within the context of housing.
How do socialists and communists like Hassan and Vosh say they would deal with the information problem because of the lack of price signals to indicate relative scarcities from centralized planning? There's two ways they do that. What you're talking about is called the computation problem. Both ways, in my opinion, are equally bullshit. The first way is they say technology is actually sufficient enough that we could use AI and shit to just solve the calculation problem. We can have a sophisticated system running that would tell us exactly what we need in society, and then we would just make what we need because the AI would tell us. Number one. The second thing is they would say, oh, actually, we already have solved the computation problem, or the calculation problem, I think is what it's called. We've already solved it. Look at places like Walmart. Walmart internally has an entire command economy. Walmart dictates, how many things it needs to order and all that, blah, blah, blah. And I would argue that that's bullshit because at the end of the day, they're also responding to market forces. They're just a little bit removed from the internal calculations the company's making, but whatever.
That housing is also addressed by like local, I guess, incumbent groups that have power there.
Okay, sorry. Ask me questions after. Save your questions.
That housing is also addressed by like local, I guess, incumbent groups that have power there. The infrastructure, again, some of that bureaucratic process is a function, and we'll get into this, is a function of environmental regulations that end up getting abused in some fashion. And then in the context of like of science and innovation, it is a sort of a risk-averse funding. But before we go into some of the specifics, from your perspective, because I've been reading a lot of there's a lot of reviews of the book out there. It's also
have you read the book?
I have. Well, I've listened to the book.
Oh. All of it?
Let's put it that way.
That's as good.
Okay. All of it? He should ask him all of it?
And to me, I like your read better than Derek's.
Okay.
Okay, but
wait, did they both record an audio version of it? If so, that's pretty funny.
But I've listened to both.
I listened to. All right, if you that just gives you a sense of at what level we're talking.
That's a different critique. But yes, I have read the book, and I've also read there's a tremendous amount of reviews about the book.
What is your critique of the book? I want to answer.
Side tangent. P.F. Young is claiming you would be a pro-Palestine simp if Hassan and other progressives were pro-Israel. Are you still going to talk about this? We have a talk set up in a few days. I actually just wanted to talk about some stuff because I was listening off stream to a conversation he had with somebody about subjectivity and comedy. I thought it'd be an interesting combo. Probably not like a hardcore debate. Maybe that'll come up. In my opinion, people that claim that I would have a totally different political position if Hassan or somebody else did, I would treat those people as pure projectionists. Can that be a word? A projectionist? Not like in a movie theater. I think I have, at this point in my career, demonstrated very much that I will agree with anybody if I think they make a good point. I'll disagree with anybody if I think they make a bad point. And my political opinions are pretty unique to myself. Or I wouldn't say unique to myself, but I can generate my political opinions based on some thought process that I can walk through from start to finish. So anybody that says that, I think they're just projecting. I think they like to take contrary positions from people that they don't like, basically.
Answer your critique of the book.
Well, I will get to that. Okay. I will get to that. But from your perspective, is this a policy or a political book?
It's kind of both, I guess, right?
Oh, I don't think you can separate those two.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
so
you know my career. I'm a policy
Yes.
reporter from way back, but
But your policy is going to be informed by your political system and by the people who are participating politically. And your policy is always going to be constrained by your political realities, always.
think something that has always been central to the way I understand that is policy, politics, and process. And I think this is very much a book about process and proceduralism are all intertwined. The idea that you can peel them apart, that you could say, oh, this bucket is policy, this bucket is politics, is not at all how I look at that question.
Yeah, and I guess we'll start with the policy side first. But broadly, my critique is there seems to be.
Have you read Abundance? Fuck no. But I feel like I would agree with basically all of it because I'm seeing all the attacks that it's getting, and it sounds like basically the same shit that people say about me.
An absence of I think the culprits that you've chosen in some instances are correct, but broadly speaking, there's an absence of analysis.
Oh no. There's an absence of blaming the billionaires.
But broadly speaking, there's an absence of analysis of power dynamics.
Yes.
I think that and the
Yes.
interplay of money and politics.
Yes, the donor
or I should
class.
say power in our society.
Yes.
I think is problematic. I mean, I think that look, there have been questions about specific policies and assumptions. I've read critiques about your assessment of why China is able to do certain things and whatnot. But and I also think the power questions really filter through a lot of what you perceive to be problematic. And then I think broadly, I think it's also difficult to understand how this is going to function as a political question. But we will get to all of that.
Second. We'll do the second in a minute.
But let's do
Let
the
me talk
policy
about
one
power.
first.
Let me talk about power. I
think one of the best questions I was ever asked, Rip, because he's become a full-on Trump sycophant now, but so Rip on to X-Kills Me. But I think it was when X-Kills Me asked me the question of what do you think is a major policy or major thing that most Americans want that somehow wealthy people have prevented us from acquiring? And the answer, there really is no answer to that. There's generally, if the majority of Americans want a thing, then it's going to happen. Whether it's because a lot of wealthy people want it too, or whether it's because they just don't have the power people say. I mean, that's up for interpretation. But the reality is do wealthy people have the ability to exert more control over our political system than an ordinary person? I mean, that's undoubtedly true. But I think the effect is grossly overstated, such that if you just assume that politics is that simple, you're basically going to miss everything when it comes to understanding why does society function the way that it does, right? This is why I keep harping on people that want to focus or fixate on billionaires constantly ignore the fact that there are a ton of Americans that legitimately believe some kind of wacky, stupid shit, regardless of any billionaire funding or anything else. You have to be able to deal with that. You can't just assume that if you peeled back all the billionaires, everybody in the country is going to start to agree on something. It's just not the case.
Interested to see this critique develop. And I just had Zephyr teach out on my show. There's an episode with her and Shoikat Chakrabarti called Abundance in the Left that I think people would be interested to hear sort of do the power debate at some length. I think this has been very revealing to me about what my friends on the left, and I think of myself usually as on the left, though, a liberal, not a leftist, I guess, mean when they say power. I think this is a book entirely about power.
Oh. But the only power they care about is the money power, the capital power. It sounds memey when I say things that even if you got rid of all the billionaires or whatever, there's other types of power that can exist, right? People can have social capital, people can have religious capital. There were popes that kind of were huge figures in the Dark Ages in Europe. But everybody just thinks that you're memeing when you say shit like that.
But it is a book that treats power highly situationally. So there is a structure of power that arranges itself around, say, a housing development in San Francisco. That is a different structure of power than arranges itself around the question of can you build interstate transmission lines, which is a different structure of power than arranges itself around the question of can you site rural broadband and build that in the way that you want to, which is a different structure of power than you see in a bunch of the other cases in the book. And one thing we are attempting to do over and over and over again is get extremely granular about what is happening. So one thing that bothers me about the power analysis that I hear on the left, let's take housing, because
The best argument I can kind of get behind is that the donor class has the money to influence public opinion with propaganda. Yeah, because I think that the issue that you run into is leftists start to realize, like, okay, fuck, we can't explain everything through billionaires. So then you get this like manufactured consent diagram or paradigm where you say, oh, look, okay, well, when the billionaires can't do it all on their own, and then ordinary people agree with billionaires, that's just because of the billionaires still, because look, they manufacture the consent. There's always a way to kind of get back to that wealthy power class, I guess, yeah. Are you disappointed that Pisco, Hutch, et cetera, have taken a stance against Ezra for these same reasons? Sam is listing off my billionaires. Yeah, I don't know. I read through the first half, I think, of Joanna's critique of the book, and it just feels like a bunch of like the standard leftist things where people can't people who are leftists just can't engage in the policy world sometimes when their ideology overrides, which I think is very frustrating. But
one thing that bothers me about the power analysis that I hear on the left, let's take housing, because I always think it's very important to ground things in like a specific case. Texas builds more housing.
I love that he said that. It is important to ground things in a specific case. Yes. Good. True. Give examples. Yes.
Or analysis that I hear on the left. Let's take housing, because I always think it's very important to ground things in like a specific case. Texas builds more housing than California. It builds more housing than New York. When people move to Austin and Houston and Dallas, they build homes. One
of the things that I wish, and see, this is where I wish you had more than just like the standard kind of like lefty critiquers when it comes to dealing with Ezra's book too, is because like it would be interesting to hear some intelligent pushback, and maybe, who knows, maybe Sam Seder will give it, but like, and also maybe this is actually dealt with in the book directly, because I haven't read the book, so maybe he's dealt with it in the book, and then if I were to say it, he would just say, oh, obviously, blah, 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 right? When you say that Texas builds more houses, yeah, of course, but it's because they're receiving new people and they don't have the density problems. They haven't built out as much as California already has, so they have the capacity for new houses. However, I would argue, anecdotally, because I don't have like the studies on hand, but I'm like 99% sure I'm correct on this, every single city in all of these red states are, after COVID, started to face the exact same problems that the blue state cities faced. Miami, everybody around here complained about rent increases. I hear the people at the gym complain about how expensive shit is. I remember when Mr. Mooten was here, he said that his rent was getting bumped up like $600 a month when he went to renew his lease. And then in Texas, for people that live in Austin, I hear so many complaints about the increase in the cost of renting an apartment. If you want to be near the Domain now, it's like super expensive. Or if you want to rent near downtown, the price have gotten insane. So like in all of these places where you do get a bunch of people moving in that weren't there before, can they initially accommodate and build more stuff? Yeah, of course they can initially. But then when they start to hit that critical mass that a lot of those liberal cities have hit, we find that they run into more or less the same problems, I think. That's the vibe that I get. Maybe he would have a response to that. I'd be curious about.
When people move to San Jose and San Francisco and Los Angeles, they don't. Is your view, do you find it a credible view to say that the issue is Texas has solved the corporate power problem, but California is permeable to corporate power and dominated by oligarchy?
Oh, no. Hopefully this conversation isn't super dumb. But technically, Sam can short circuit all of this because Sam sometimes is more leftist than liberal, and Sam will just say, actually, yeah, I do think the billionaires control California as well, which would short circuit this entire combo, but we'll see.
In a way that Texas, or for that matter, Florida, is not.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily, I think it's...
Sorry, hold on real quick. At Destiny, this is not true. The rent prices in Austin in specific areas have dropped because they did just build more. Yeah, but is it like in the areas that are near like downtown or the nice areas that people want to live, or is it just like the outskirts of Austin where you get like this suburban kind of creep? That's important.
That matter, Florida is not.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily, I think it's not necessarily corporate power. I think what we're talking about is money. I think we're just talking about money. And
so Texas has solved the money in politics problem, but California does not.
Well, I can tell you that, like, if you want to compare, let's say, San Francisco to Houston, right, you just have a lot more space in Houston. You have a lot more money in San Francisco. And so the power that rests with the money is more concentrated, literally, right, and has the ability in those instances to stop this housing project or that housing project.
One thing I'm curious about, is it even... Jesus, I did not expect the difference between this to be this significant. Houston's square mileage is 640.4 square miles. San Francisco is 46.9 square miles. God damn. I wonder if San Francisco gives way, though, to more suburbs than Houston does. I don't know. Metropolitan areas make stuff really weird in the U.S. when it comes to calculating like how big a city is. But I just don't know for San Francisco.
Like the ability in the
one question that I would be curious. I hope Ezra asks Sam this. What are the capital interests in making it more expensive? Like, who's winning in San Francisco? And now this might be unfair, but no, I'm going to stop saying this. That is unfair for me to ask people to name examples or to give specifics. I want you to explain to me, what is the process by which a billionaire shuts down housing development in San Francisco? Walk me through that. Like, is there some land that gets zoned or upzoned for more housing? A company comes in and bids on it, and a billionaire comes in and they say, no, I'm going to buy the land so that nobody can build on it. Or what does that process look like? Because I don't know. I've never heard a story like this before. I have heard a lot of NIMBY stories. Sometimes they're wealthy people. Sometimes there's middle-class people. But I'm curious, like, what is that process by which you think capital interest comes in and shuts down the expansion of housing? Why would they even do that? I don't know. Because like capital owners would benefit from having more people in an area, more customers, more money to be made, more workers in there. If the workers move in and the land is cheaper, or where the apartments or the houses are cheaper, it means that you can pay them less because they're the stipends and everything you provide for moving and living would be cheaper. Like who's benefiting from this?
Those instances to stop this housing project or that housing project. Like, look at Austin, for instance. You bring up Austin. In the course of Austin,
no.
and this was, I read this in the review, because obviously I'm not studying Austin or San Francisco for that matter. But Joe Wiesenthal wrote, that his observation about Austin was that it was cheap, and then it got very expensive. Then there was, and it was a function of costs went up, rents went up. It became expensive there.
Rents have gone down in Austin because they built so much.
When I don't like statements like that, we got to get really into the weeds, such that we would have to say we're going to have a specific debate on the housing market of one city. Now, I'm not saying that Ezra is necessarily wrong. I'll be honest, I don't know. But I do think that you have to speak with a high degree of specificity when you talk about rents in a city, and everybody should know this. If you go to, I say, for instance, I lived in LA for 3 years. That's the thing that I say. I actually have never lived in LA in my life. I lived in Glendale for a year. I lived in Culver City for a year. And then I actually lived in Orange County and Huntington Beach for a year. But I just say I lived in LA because it's LA. That's what people know it as. When somebody says something like rents in LA have fallen on the average, that might be true, but it's a lot different living in downtown LA versus living, LA is really expensive as a city. I don't even know where LA starts and stops, but there are a lot of different parts to LA. Some you might want to live in, some you definitely don't want to live in. I know for Omaha, for instance, I know there are neighborhoods, like if you live in Regency, that's where Warren Buffett lives. That's a really nice neighborhood to live in. Obviously, there are a lot of really nice houses there, but Omaha is a very big city. There's a lot of shitty places to live there too. So when somebody says the aggregate or the average rents have risen or fallen, there could be specific areas where the rent has increased pretty substantially, and there could be other areas where the rent has fallen, and you don't really get an accurate snapshot of the city, I would say, just by saying rents have risen or fallen, because it really depends on what area we're talking about. But that's getting really, I think, into the weeds on that. But
they built so much.
I really want to hold on what you said the first time.
But
San Francisco has concentrated money in a way that
there was no change in the building codes, for instance. The argument that
the building code responded in Austin. So you can just go look. I don't know if you guys are able to pull up data on the show and show it, but just go pull it up if we can. You can search Fred housing starts in Austin and San Francisco. You could just do this in general. You can look at this analysis across blue and red cities.
But
what the difference? Hold on, let me just. I want to go through this example, but we can go through a bunch of them. Houston doesn't have a zoning code. That's why it's easier to build there. I was talking to a developer there, and he said, look, the thing...
Destiny, your fear is that the rents in the suburbs dropped but didn't in the city. Be for real, please. I don't know if you think that that's impossible, that rents in areas that people want to live can go up substantially, and that rents in other areas can fall because the area either becomes shittier or people just... I don't know if you've never rented any place in your entire life ever, you've never looked to move to any place ever, but that is absolutely a thing that can happen, but okay.
everybody knows about Houston, if you're a developer, is it's a bad place to be a homeowner. It's a good place to be a developer. And this is what I mean when I say the whole book in a way is about power. That in these procedural questions, in this question of how do you get housing approved, what we have created in many blue cities is a lot of veto points. And that veto point can be used by corporate power. It can be used by moneyed interests. It can be used by local homeowners who are not power in the way we would normally think of them, but sure as hell are power when you're thinking about whether or not to build housing.
Yep.
It can be used by all sorts of players. And so I think that one of the places where I quite diverge from some of my other friends on this is that I think when you create this level of proceduralism, this level of veto points, they get captured by interests over time. And that is a place where power can pool. Now, I think the place where I probably part, just to finish the thought, I think the place where I probably part is that I think that the left is often very attentive to power when it is coming from certain recognized villains,
but not
and
others.
much less attentive to power when it is coming from people who might in other contexts look like allies.
Yeah, this is the frustrating part. This is the thing I've said a lot is that, for instance, I think one of your biggest enemies when it comes to building homes or getting affordable housing, and I've never heard anybody, I guess maybe besides Ezra, he kind of is recognizing it now. I've never heard anybody in politics recognize this. Homeowners are your biggest enemy because nobody wants to talk about the trade-off. But if you want to make housing more affordable, you must hurt local homeowners. There is no way around that. It is directly opposite in interests if you are a homeowner and you are somebody who's coming in to rent or buy. Your interests are directly contrary to one another. So if you want more affordable housing, if you want more affordable rents, you must hurt the local land or homeowners or building owners. You have to hurt them. And nobody is willing to address that topic head on. Nobody has the bravery to go against people that own their homes.
Or just be local homeowners. But that can also be real power wielded in a problematic way.
Well, but you listed off three entities that have power. Corporate power, moneyed interests, and homeowners. And I would suggest to you that in all three of those that you just listed, that money is ultimately the controlling factor. So for instance, I can tell you, like, I don't know San Francisco, I don't know Austin, I know Worcester, Mass. And I can tell you that during urban renewal,
he's going to give an example of some billionaire or huge company that came in, and that's literally where all of his analysis starts and stops for Sam Seder, which is frustrating, but he's smarter than this, but whatever.
There was an entire neighborhood that was completely, I don't know if you've ever been to Worcester, gone through 290. There was an entire neighborhood called...
Oh my God. Or is he going to give an example of, we wanted to build good public housing here and the wealthy people just wanted condos or something?
The Laurel Clayton, I think it was, that ended up dumping people into a housing project, Plumley Village. And it was all run by the Worcester Redevelopment Authority. It was completely streamlined. None of the other, what we would call today groups. There was no equity involved in this, or equitable justice or anything like this. And the neighborhood was completely destroyed because the input only essentially came from this big insurance company and the Worcester Redevelopment Authority, which was essentially owned by the same type of people. And I only know about this because a buddy of mine was homeless in high school because of how much destruction generationally it had created as a result of that. And so when you list off those three elements of power, in my mind, those are all moneyed interests. Those local homeowners, I'm sure there are stories of low-income people who own homes in an area that hasn't been redeveloped, is able to stop building. But I would imagine those are very far and few between.
And I think we should be
The thing is it doesn't have to be the ultra wealthy that are stopping something. It could just be a person that owns a home, right? Or it could just be anybody, even technically people that rent. No. If you rent, you would want pricing to come down, actually. If you're a renter, not a rentee, not somebody that owns. This also ties into the issue that I said before, that everybody gets mad at me when I say it, but like I don't like the fact that owning a home is seen as like a primary investment vehicle, because when it is a primary investment vehicle, and it is for most people, the most important asset they own is their house. That also creates a lot of, I would argue, distortionary effects, to where if I have a home, well, I really don't want anything to help the housing market around here, because this is literally my primary nest egg, and anything you do to help out people afford homes around here is literally hurting my retirement. It's hurting the most important asset I have, which I think is really bad. It's a really toxic way to affect the market, in my opinion.
In agreement, right? If this is the case you're making, then I think we should be in agreement, because there's no doubt.
Well, I'm saying it's moneyed interest.
It's sometimes money interest for sure, right?
Well, what is it the other times?
Let me finish the thought, okay. and then you can give me your rebuttal. When you create these highly legalistic systems, the people with the money to hire lawyers and lobbyists are going to be more capable within them, and so the structure of a society that begins to bury so much in bureaucracy, where you have to know when to show up to the planning meeting and you have to know who the city council members are. Like, it begins to...
Are most homes in big cities owned by privates in the USA? In Europe, it's mostly owned by conglomerates. In the US, I think the vast majority of houses are owned by individuals. But in the United States, we have a lot of highly preferential tax treatment given to individuals that I think makes it really hard for like large corporations or whatever to compete with an individual buying a home. There's just it's such a tax advantaged thing, I think.
Structurally favor those who can navigate that society. So when we talk about things like upzoning, where we want to make it possible to build more houses in an area, like, everybody knows it is almost impossible to upzone a rich area. And that is because they are able to bend this process to their will. Now, you can take a place like California,
all right?
Right?
Let me address that. I mean, I get that point there. And I think that is what worries, I don't know about other people, but that's the type of thing that worries me, because the argument you've just made is almost identical to the one that I would have every week.
Wait, you don't necessarily need to hurt existing homeowners. In upzoning, e.g., the home sales prices can increase because the single family home can now be converted into 4 homes or more, e.g., how much would a developer pay for the land? Yeah, but the thing is, you get into another weird thing in America where, I don't know if it's like this in Europe at all, I don't know, but in the United States, people think that they have a moral right to live in the same house for generation after generation after generation. This is why like gentrification is such a huge issue in the United States. People think that if your family owned a home and then you grew up in that home, that you should have the right to own that home, and then your children should have the right to own that home, and everybody into perpetuity should have the right to own that home, and you should never be forced to sell or have to sell ever, even if the surrounding land. So it makes it's a weird conversation to have when you talk about trying to make things more expensive, I guess, or increase the value of surrounding areas. Because if you price people out that are already there, they're going to say that that's unethical, and you can't do that, basically. Yeah.
Aid is almost identical to the one that I would have every week with Tim Carney, who I know, back in the day, which is an idea that the problem with wealthy influence, and if you and I agree, then it is money. The problem with
we don't agree that it's all money.
Okay,
money is one mechanism of influence.
But I think it is the biggest one. Would you agree with that?
It depends on the issue. So look, there are a bunch of these issues. Where money
let me finish my point about Tim Carney. He would say that you need to have less government. That way, it cannot be as corrupted or manipulated by moneyed interest. Now, I don't know if you think that money is the problem 51% of the time or 30% of the time.
I don't think categorically asking that question is, but here, let me say where I disagree with Tim Carney, because maybe it'll clarify where maybe you and I don't agree. Tim wants a less capable state. I want a more capable state. Tim wants a state that does fewer things. I want a state capable of doing more things, including the things it has already promised to do. So when I look at California high-speed rail, I work backwards and I say, what the fuck happened that the state of California...
Yeah, I don't know if Ezra realizes this or not, but they need to talk about what they mean when they say money interest, because I don't think these guys are in agreement, even though they seem to think they are. Ezra seems to think they are. When Sam says money interest, Sam is exclusively talking about billionaires and like huge corporations. And I think Ezra's just saying money in general, like a middle-class homeowner's money. I think so. I think they need to resolve that war.
And I say, what the fuck happened that the state of California could not build high-speed rail, which they can do in Japan, they can do in China, they can do in Europe. Tim looks at it and says they shouldn't be trying to build high-speed rail. And so the disagreement I have with Doge, with a lot of different things, with a lot of my friends on the right, is they want to reduce state capacity. I come at this from as a liberal who wants the state to accomplish very difficult things, decarbonizing the economy, building enough affordable housing, including, by the way, public housing, building mass public infrastructure, things like high-speed rail or the Big Dig or the Second Avenue subway here in New York City. And what I see is a state failing to accomplish its goals.
Right.
Now, they would say, don't fucking try. I would say, fix the state. And one issue with the state is that it has become so highly regulated, not in terms, I find that when I use the term deregulation, like people's brains turn off because they think of
you should never use the term deregulation. That is a term that has been completely captured by conservatives who want to defang the state and make the state incapable of doing anything. I feel like I hear Ezra flirt with that word. He should never, ever, 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 ever use that word. That word is lost to conservatives. You should never, ever use the word deregulate. Even if I heard it, I would instantly assume deregulate. Oh, you just want to make so the government can't do fuck all. Gotcha. You think that laissez-faire capitalism will solve every single problem in society. Okay, I gotcha. All right, dude.
Deregulation is something that the state does for the market. But no player is more highly regulated than the state itself, often by Republicans, often because of power in the way that you would define it. But I think a lot of liberals, a lot of leftists have, one, and this is my critique going backwards, ceased to see this, but two, they don't take state failure seriously. And when something like California high-speed rail happens or rural broadband, they sort of move on instead of saying, why are we not delivering? We are the people who believe in government. People are pissed at government for a reason. How do we make government deliver?
See, and I think and I think in terms of results, I think you and I are largely aligned. But I think the problem is, and you bring up Doge, and it's ironic that you and Carney will approach it in a very similar way, but anticipate different outcomes. But that being aside, I mean, I think that is where, people get a little bit...
I feel like I've heard Ezra talk about Doge, and I feel like Ezra gives way too much credence to the concept of Doge. I don't know if it's like a political gambit, where he's like, well, sure, fine. Like, I understand that, like, Doge maybe did some bad things, but we should all celebrate, like, cutting government waste or something. I really don't like, if I remember correctly, I don't like the way that Ezra talks about Doge, but...
But see, I don't think we're approaching it similarly. I think it's at a level of abstraction, it's similar, and then you go granular and it's not at all.
Yes! I love that Ezra's saying this too. I don't know if I'm influencing these people, if we're all just getting to the same spot. You need examples. We have to stop with the concepts and the theory and I think we agree, blah, blah. No, hold on. When you say you think we agree, let's talk about a particular thing, because we don't agree. We can say kind of the same words, but we don't actually agree at the end of the day. When we start getting into the examples, we can see that. Let me grab a Red Bull. Hold on one sec.
but see, this is what we're talking about. See,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. What are we talking about?
it's their policy and politics are in the same place. So we have a level of abstraction, we have a level of granular, right? And the point is the way that these two commingle, I think, becomes problematic where these two things meet, because your identification of the primary problem, right? I mean, this is the point. Like the you don't address moneyed interest per se in the book. The primary problem is, I mean, if you just do a summary of the book, primary problem has to do more with the regulation and the handcuffing the state has done of itself.
Yeah. One thing that people, and this is an ideological barrier, and it's a significant one, and it's why I don't like listening to socialists argue, is that money is not only is money not always bad, sometimes money is incredibly good. Sometimes money is incredibly positive. When you have your invisible hand, okay, when there is some incentive to create something that the public wants, and there is money to be made doing it, this is the market at its best. This is where we get things like Ozempic, or with government prodding somebody along, this is where we get treatments or cures for rare diseases that ordinarily there wouldn't be money to be made doing it, but the government can incentivize it. Or it's where we get new products or services or technologies, or it's where we get, under 10 millimeter, nanometer transistors or whatever, right? Like, money is not always bad. You have to make sure that it's oriented in like a positive direction. But for people like Sam, unfortunately, it seems like there's this foundational assumption that money is bad, and therefore anything that money chases is bad, and it just shuts down a lot of potential conversation, I think, in a really negative way.
But the state doesn't do it itself. Like, all of this handcuffing comes from a place, and it's either moneyed interest or it's not. And I have no doubt that at different times.
This is where I think you've really oversimplified politics.
Oh my God! I love him. Yes. And he's right. You've oversimplified it down to something that it's perfectly distilled into a problem that your ideology captures. Kind of like how anytime something bad happens in society, the crazy rabid feminist would say, oh, it's toxic masculinity. And it's like, oh, what a coincidence that your one pet project, that your one ideology can actually solve all the ills in society, and that every ill in society can be traced back as one thing. Like, isn't that convenient for you and what you believe in? Yes.
I have no doubt that at different times.
This is where I think you've really oversimplified politics. I want to try to find the right example, because I think if we stay high,
yes,
we just are like
you're not
yelling
anywhere.
About this abstract
Yes.
question of money.
You need to get into examples. Yes, come on, good one.
Let's talk. We both believe in decarbonization.
I think that's really grounded, though.
Hold on, but let's talk about it from this perspective. We both believe in decarbonization, right? Climate change is a problem.
Yes.
And we sort of see the pathway on that is we have to build a lot of green energy to reorient our economy so you can run a modern economy on a green energy basis. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So to do that, you have to move all this energy production over to renewable sources, and then you have to get the energy from where it currently is, right? A solar farm, a wind farm, a hydroelectric, project, whatever it is, and run it through transmission lines to where we plug shit into the wall and charge it. I have done a lot of coverage of this failure point because we are, to be perfectly clear about this, failing to build enough transmission lines. There is no world in which our decarbonization strategy works if we cannot increase by orders of magnitude how fast we are building transmission lines. There is money trying to build transmission lines. There is money trying to slow down the building of transmission lines. Just walking into this process and saying, where's the money, doesn't get you anywhere. Like, I have talked to the private equity figures trying to get a transmission line built. I have also talked to the green, new dealers trying to get that same transmission line built. And I've also seen the people standing in the way of it who have all their reasonable and good arguments. I don't find, when I dig into these things, that the way I can just...
that there's like an evil billionaire that's stopping everything, that's stopping decarbonization, that's stopping, more efficient transfer of energy. That, yeah, it's unfortunately, it's never that simple.
repeatedly sort politics as well. Like over here, there's the money, and the money is bad, and over here there's the not money, and the not money is good.
Yes.
Usually, there's money on both sides of it. There are sometimes unions on both sides of it. And so, the structure of the book, because I hope people come from this and want to read it. The structure of the book is typically working backwards from a problem. We're not building enough housing. If we go granular on that, what can we learn? We're not building enough transmission lines. If we go granular, what can we learn? And why
do you ask me this? I can't tell if I get like a new viewer every day that asks the same question that I feel like I've answered 1 trillion times. What do you think about funding high-speed rail and public transit? I am a huge fan of public transit. I'm a huge fan of high-speed rail. I don't, obviously, like, yeah.
Just don't think abstracting out to money tied the state's hands. If money could untie the state's hands on a lot of big building projects, all these fucking developers would do it. But it can't because the proceduralism takes on a life of its own.
I follow what you're saying, that in each case there are specifics that are different, and you cannot generalize. It sounds like what you're saying.
You can generalize some, but you have to take seriously the specific issues in each case.
I have no doubt.
Your generality should emerge out of the granularity.
Okay, what are the generalities? Like, this is what I guess what I'm asking.
I am saying the default in America has become that building, particularly when the state is involved, has become too slow and expensive. We have created an architecture of policy that makes it too hard for us to achieve our goals in the real world, and for that matter, in social insurance. Say it again.
Sam is going to say, I agree. But the problem is we are Republicans, or billionaire interests have kneecapped the government, so the government can't do anything, is what it's going to be, I think. Yeah.
Who's the we?
It depends.
That's not satisfying. Sam's laughing because the answer is obviously the billionaires. It has to be the billionaires.
You're not going to like that. But look, here's a version of the we.
Well, but I'm trying to address the point because, for instance, okay, so
let me give you a better answer to who's the we.
Well, but why I think this is important though is because this to me is the central question, really, about the book. Because I think, like, I could say there's some things in it I like, there's some things that I don't like, but the general point is, I think, for instance, like, where does the title abundance come from?
From Derek's piece on abundance.
Okay, we have seen an entire movement build up about abundance, correct? I mean, like, there is a lot of money behind this broad.
Is he going to... I shouldn't have paused because I'm about to make a really stupid prediction. He's not going to say that, like, the billionaires are now backing Ezra Klein or something, right? That we can explain all of Ezra's book with billionaire support or something? Well,
I mean, like, there is a lot of money behind this broad notion of abundance. And Derek, I think it was on the Lex Friedman podcast, said something to the effect of, there is a fight within the Democratic Party. I don't think he used the word for the soul of the Democratic Party, but for where we're going as a political, as a political movement.
And it feels like the implication is that, and billionaires have bought out the abundance agenda, and billionaires who have captured the Republican Party are now trying to capture your part of it next. Now the billionaires have got into abundance, and they're trying to move the Democratic Party in the way the Republican Party is going or something. But there's no way, right?
And folks from the Nicholson Center have said, like, we have identified the Democratic Party as the best place to have this abundance agenda. And so as a political matter, they're not talking about, in that instance in the Nicholson, they're not saying, like, in San Francisco, we need to roll back this specific policy. This is attempting to develop a movement.
Well, I want to answer for myself here, not for Niskanen, right? So my first piece that leads
you were on that Lex Friedman podcast. I mean, that's
people should go listen to it. I stand by everything I said on the Lex Friedman podcast. But Derek, I believe I'd have to go back and look at what section you're quoting from. But Derek is responding to a lot of very heated left criticism of the book, which, to be honest, neither of us were expecting.
Oh no, because Ezra hasn't spent his time cutting his teeth in the brutal leftist debate sphere, where these guys don't give a fuck about any measurable improvement in people's lives. It's only about ideological purity. That's the only thing that matters to these people. Actually, I shouldn't speak for Ezra's experience. I don't know how much he or how much time he spent like fighting these types of people. But
the way I wrote, at least my parts of the book, to me, are extremely compatible with virtually and frankly necessary for all left goals. It's a book about affordable housing, decarbonization, state capacity. And my initial piece that leads to this book is in, I believe, 2021. And it is building off of the fact that the Biden administration is trying to do decarbonization through building a lot. And as I begin to follow that policy project, I begin to realize we're not going to get it done under these laws. So that's, I think, one very important thing. But I want to go back to what you asked a minute ago, which is who's we? In this book, we is Democrats. This book is very focused for a very particular reason that we can talk about, because not that the only problems in governance come from the left. They don't. My first book was all about largely about the right and polarization and asymmetric polarization. But I became very interested, having moved back to California in 2018, in why is this state governed by all these Democrats doing so badly? Why is it unaffordable? Why is it building less clean energy than Texas? Why is it not building enough housing? And part of the motivation for doing this book is there are a lot of problems Republicans, I mean, we're living through them right now. There are a lot of problems Republicans impose on the political system. But there's a sort of rigor and confrontation that I think is demanded when you look at the states where the people who, broadly speaking, agree with you are in power, and it's not working the way you want it to. You're not getting the outcomes you want to get. And so one story this book is telling is about a collision of the New Deal left, which is very, very focused on growth and building, and in many ways is very reckless with that, right? You were talking about Worcester, Massachusetts, which sounds to me like it's a story from that era. But we could give, Robert Moses is a classic story of this. We can talk about, we really do despoil like environments and poison streams, and we, run highways through marginalized communities and all the things people know. And in response to that, again, correctly, a new left arises. Ralph Nader, Rachel Carson, the entire environmental movement. And it passes all kinds of bills that are very, very, very effective and consequential in their day to restrain government's ability to act recklessly and to do things without considering and creating space for consideration of their impacts. So you have things like the National Environmental Policy Act and all these, bills and projects of that era. And then in this fucking maddening historical moment we're in, the problem becomes not that we're building too much, but we're building too little. And particularly building too little in the places where that new left was most powerful, California, New York, places like that. And so this is a confrontation with having created a very successful architecture to challenge, restrain, and sue the government that is now being used against liberal or leftist, for that matter, projects. If you would like the government to do...
If Ezra would just say housing like a normal person, he would win over 20% of his haters. No, I disagree. I think housing is probably one of the most contentious areas where people have the least understanding of what the reality of the situation is and the most contradictory expectations of what the situation could be. Like I gave that earlier, that, for instance, like the interests of people that are buying homes and the interests of the people that own homes are directly conflicting, and nobody will address that or deal with that. It is an insurmountable political, or it's not insurmountable, but it seems like an insurmountable political question because of the unwillingness on both sides to deal with that contradiction. Or like if you ask people where the problems in housing are, a lot of people just think that it's because of BlackRock or private interests that are buying up homes or whatever. And these people have there's a couple markets, I think like Atlanta might be one, where they might have more impact than not maybe. But by and large, it's just not the issue. The problem is harder things like how do we build more housing? How do you do things that hurt homeowners without them feeling hurt when their primary investment vehicle is their home? Like these are the challenging questions that nobody really wants to deal with.
Great. I would like to see a lot more public housing too. The government cannot currently do public housing under the regulatory structure under which it operates. And yes, some of that is money, but it's also the fact that you can sue to stop all this stuff under the National Environmental Policy Act. It's also the fact that government, what I call everything bagel liberalism, loads huge amounts of standards and projects and goals into everything that public money touches. So in California, it costs about 2.2x per square foot to build housing as it does in Texas. Fine, market rate housing, 2x per square foot. If you are doing affordable housing subsidized by the government, it's more than 4x. So why are we making the government's housing for the poorest people so much harder, slower, and more costly to build. And like, is that in the long run good for our goals? I think it is important to confront why government, in the place where people agree with us more than in the places where they don't, is not getting the outcomes we both want to see it achieve. That's what the book is about.
And I don't know how much public housing is in Texas, or how much public housing is in Texas, or if we're, and that seems to me to be a relevant question. But the notion of the everything bagel liberalism, this is the idea that like we have constraints on federal money that a certain amount of union workers, or there may be a certain amount of equity associated with it. And at one point in
or contracting procurement or a million other things, right?
And certainly like there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that, we could go through these bills and find things that are problematic. If they are coming necessarily from, there's two issues. One is, there was one point in the book where you talked about, we have a choice whether we're going to put filters into apartments that are built, public housing built near highways, or the people are going to live under the highway. And it seems to me that there's got to be a third choice, as opposed to we're going to poison people slowly or we're going to keep them unhoused.
So I want to say specifically what you're talking about, that section. So I'm talking to Jasmine Tong, who's an affordable housing developer, does nonprofit affordable housing. And what she is saying is that compared to market rate housing, when she is building housing for homeless people, she is subject to environmental, green building standards, et cetera, that are so far beyond what market rate housing has to do that it often makes it impossible to finance the thing entirely. And a lot of these projects, as you both know, fall apart.
One issue, this comes up with healthcare a lot. One issue is that, I don't know how to explain this or what the fallacy would be. You guys should figure this out because all of you fuckers do this. When there is a thing that relates to somebody's health, people can no longer see any type of granularity, and they view it entirely as absolutes. So for instance, I feel like if you were to create an air filtration system for a home, and then you were to create a newer one, and the newer one cleans the air even better, people view that newer one not as like an upgrade that if you have the money you can afford it, you should get it, but like as a necessity or as a right to it. And that if you don't have it, you're like dying. You're being like mistreated, or it's like this egregious affront to the rights of some individual. But the issue is that if you're a homeless person, you're probably okay living in a home that's not built up to the most impressive or extensive like regulations or code or whatever, whatever, because whatever you live in is going to be infinitely better than being fucking homeless,
And I am saying there that it makes a lot of sense. You understand how people get into a conversation that we should have better than average air filtration systems in, affordable housing built near a freeway. But in a city where you are not building enough affordable housing at all, because again, you have layered not just that, but a million of these onto every individual project. So again, it's costing much more per square foot than market rate housing. At some point, you have to begin to choose.
Most public housing is built near the highway. Why is that?
Say again?
Most public housing, some huge percentage of public housing is built near highways.
We're not even talking, yes, that's all. I mean, listen, we're in agreement that that's all power. But when we are talking, I am saying that we are not building enough affordable housing affordably in California.
Why are we addressing that far downstream the issue when we're completely eliding the issue that is upstream from that,
we're not completely eliding the issue. The whole fucking book, man, is about wrecking these zoning codes that allow rich people to keep it out of their areas. Okay, but if you can't build it in the first place because you can't make it affordable to build, which the people who build it will tell you, I think that I've actually found this set of arguments I've had in this really productive in a way. I don't disagree with you about power, but every time we talk about it specifically, like, yeah, that's a problem. But
it's that classic quote of don't let perfection become the enemy of progress. People that have compulsive planning issues in real life run into this a lot. If you ever met like a planner before, to where they'll sit there and they'll plan and plot and plan and plan and plan, and they'll never actually work on any project. They'll never actually do the thing because they're so caught up in trying to plan it out to be perfect. And then they never actually get to do the thing at all. And this idea that, you know, you have to build these homes in a way that is up to 72 different million codes and it's got to be perfect every single way. It's like, hold on, let's just get something down first, and then we can improve from there, you know?
No, we actually have to solve the problem. Like, if you want to make housing development by right, which I think you should do, so that rich communities can't stop it, and the affordable, like, I live on a block with public housing right now. I believe there should be public housing mixed in everywhere, but you can't build it if you cannot affordably build it. If you're going to, you know, in Chicago, the mayor of Chicago sent out this tweet and he said, hey, look at all we're doing. We built 10,000 units of affordable housing for $11 billion. People are like, you did fucking what? Like whatever it was, it came to $1.1 million per unit. If we're going to cost $1.1 million per unit when the government builds housing for poor people, we can't build enough of it. It doesn't matter where you're building it.
I mean, I think you know, even if I stipulate that it is exclusively zoning requirements or the everything bagel liberalism that is creating the barrier to build, you know, housing. You know, we can look at the CHIPS Act. And that was also something that had everything bagel liberalism built into it, which apparently, as far as I can tell, up until, you know, Donald Trump shows up, was quite effective. The timeline of things, definitely, of course.
Hold. They went back and answered one of my critiques on the CHIPS Act. If you go back to that original piece, one of the things I'm saying is that they've loaded a lot into this bill, but taken nothing away. After that piece comes out, President Joe Biden signs a bill from Ted Cruz and Mark Kelly exempting the CHIPS Act from environmental review under the theory, as the administration says, that we cannot allow this to be delayed for years and years under environmental review. You can think that's bad or good, but if you want to say the CHIPS Act is going smoothly and well, it's in part because they took the critique.
Well, I think there are instances, and you talk about I-95, for instance, what Shapiro was able to do.
Pennsylvania.
The idea that, and my argument is, without that equity, you do get people living in apartments that are going to slowly kill them or give them asthma or higher asthma rates.
Like, again, I'm not trying to sound mean or whatever, but bro, if you have a homeless guy and they're homeless and you're like, listen, we could get you a place built, but like if we would have put you in one of these homes that I'm going to build, you might be or you might have a higher chance of developing asthma in the future. So we're going to go ahead and hold off on this until we can get something. Like, that's just a delusional take. I'm sorry, but you are so far removed from reality at this point. Like, there have to be granular compromises that we can make here. It's not always the best and latest thing, but this is the American mindset when it comes to things relating to your health. This actually perfectly exemplifies what I literally just said earlier about how if there's anything available related to health, Americans think you have to have the latest and best of it, or else it's like a fucking crime, basically.
You do get people living in apartments that are going to slowly kill them or give them asthma or higher asthma rates. Without that equity, you are going to destroy a neighborhood, and like we saw it in Worcester, and like with generational impact. But I also think, as a political matter, it is extremely difficult unless there is some type of buy-in from everybody that there are circumstances that qualify as an emergency or an urgency that give you the political ability to do something like this. So, for instance, in the I-95 thing, you say,
guys, someone telling the audio's cutting out. Is it, or is it just for this one schizo in YouTube chat?
That is an example of where this type of like power, sort of centralized power to bypass this stuff, is effective, and it was very effective in that moment. But if you contemplate like the constituents,
don't you think the legitimacy for government activity will reduce if people get asthma from public housing? No. I think that if we had no homeless people, well, in a weird roundabout way, actually, yeah, it would. But we need to adjust the way that we view things. Like, there's a such thing as a good problem, like, arguably, having additional people dying from cancer, in a way, is a good problem. That's a developed society problem. It means your people are living long enough to develop cancer and die from it. It's better to have a society where you're having issues relating to older people getting cancer and dying, or even more on point, things like dementia, diseases of older people. It's good when your society is having those problems. It means that people aren't dying in childbirth or dying of cholera or malaria, right? There are good problems. Now, there's still problems that you need to address, and you should address them. You should address them vigorously, but you have to be able to keep track of like where you're at, you know? Like I have issues related to, I pay a huge amount of tax money to the government, okay? Now, I could not pay tax money by working at McDonald's if I wanted to. But like, that's not a good problem to have. I'd rather have the issue of like, God, my tax bill's so huge, rather than, making $36K a year. Don't even have to worry about taxes at all now, right? There are good problems to have, you know? If your issue is, my God, all these poor people in the United States that used to be homeless are starting to develop asthma. Okay, well, this is a problem you work on. But holy shit, you don't have any more homeless people? That's amazing. That's good. Work on the next problem then.
Who and constituencies who would...
Destiny makes up the wildest shit. You literally just heard Sam Seder say we don't want homeless people living in homes giving them asthma. He just said that. How am I making it? He literally just said this.
The I-95 thing, you cite that as an example of where this type of like power, sort of centralized power to bypass this stuff is effective. And it was very effective in that moment. But if you contemplate like the constituents who and constituencies who would be for it versus against it within, you know, there may be people who are like, I got a store on Route 1, and if 95, that bridge is down, I'm going to make a lot of money because people are going to drive by. But outside of that, there was an alignment where in the fact that you could essentially bypass these things in a state of an emergency. There was the political will to do that. There was the political will to do that in the context of the CHIPS Act and to revitalize industrialization. You had buy-in. And on some level, it feels like some of what you're talking about with the jettisoning of the everything bagel liberalism, maybe it's like it's not what you're talking about jettisoning is not the poppy seeds or the garlic or whatever it is on top, but it's like maybe the salt inside or, you know, the dough.
Well, you have to be very connected to what you're trying to achieve. Like, I guess I would turn this question on you because I feel like we want to be, as you were saying earlier, upstream. Do you think we can build enough affordable housing if the units cost $650,000 to $1 million to complete per unit?
Yes, if we tax the billionaires. Say it, Sam. I'm about to come. Wait. I don't want to have a DSP moment. Please say yes if we just tax the billionaires. Please say it.
Just flat. Like, can we pay for that?
I would imagine not, depending on the locality.
So what should...
Okay. No coming.
We do then? Like, what is your view of what is pushed? It doesn't cost that much to build market rate housing. So what is your view? If when you trigger government money, you often double the per square foot cost in some cases of the housing it builds, or when you trigger government money, they don't get things like high-speed rail done. Like, all I want to do here, man, I'm not here for like a big like left liberal moderate fight. I actually want the government to deliver things I think we both want it to deliver. I don't want it to give people asthma, but I need it to be able to build housing because homelessness is a fucking problem. And it is the worst problem for the people experiencing it, not for me. So what is your theory of how you get this cost of construction down, the speed up? There's got to be something here.
Well, it's obviously localized, right? I mean, I have a sense of like in New York, how it could be cheaper.
Okay, let's do New York.
We do not allow developers to sit on land and wait for the market to catch up to them.
I don't show me somebody like me right now. I don't believe this happens. I don't believe it. I don't believe that somebody just buys land and does nothing with it. This is probably my guess is some of the most productive land in the world if you put anything on it and charge money to use it. Whether you're talking about a corporate headquarters, whether you're talking about some kind of rental property, whether literally anything, there is no shot that there's all this land in New York City that people are buying and sitting there doing nothing with it. I don't believe this. I don't believe it. For vacancy, people are linking saying it's a 1.4% vacancy rate at the moment, which I think is incredibly low for apartments. Oh, actually, there is one weird way where commercial property could sit unused. I don't know if Sam actually knows about it. I remember hearing about this around COVID. One really weird thing, but this isn't even about like greedy capital owners or whatever. It's just a weird function of how commercial loans work, that you would run into this problem where you buy a thing, let's say you buy a thing for $10 million and you get a loan from the bank. Well, let's say you put some percentage down, whatever, but you have a $10 million loan. What that loan is based on is the rents that you collect in order for you to maintain the loan. And if market conditions become unfavorable and the rents for that area drop, in these specific instances, you would be more incentivized to maintain a vacancy and to just be delinquent on your loan or to wait, rather than to charge a lower rent. Because if the company that lent you the money sees that you're charging lower rents, then they reevaluate the commercial loan that you have, and then you might lose the loan or whatever. This was one situation I'd heard where somebody could be financially incentivized to keep a place home. I don't know how many places it's actually affected, though, and I think this was mainly around COVID, so I don't think there's even like a huge problem. But that was like one specific example. But I'm curious. I'm so curious if I was going to push him for an example on this. I really want to hear this.
How it could be cheaper.
Okay, let's do New York.
We do not allow developers to sit on land and wait for the market to catch up to them. We do not allow homes to sit unoccupied without it being a cost on those people. I mean, there is a lot of excess housing.
That's a lie. This is a fucking lie that progressives love to tell this strange lie of all the vacant housing. They do it with Chinese people in fucking Vancouver and Toronto, and they do it in the United States in every big city as well with somebody said it was Blackstone, not BlackRock, but with corporate owners, they say there are all these empty homes and people just buy it and they appreciate on the value. That's bullshit. You would make more money if you rented it out. You'd make, these are cash flow things. You don't just make money on real estate by buying it and having the property appreciate. You have cash flows that are tied to these things. This is why when you buy a home as an individual, you're not investing in real estate, you're buying a fucking house, all right? You're not making a cash flow unless you charge your kids rent. The idea that all these people just buy this property and sit under these huge vacancies, it's bullshit. Show the numbers. They'll never show the numbers. Or if they do, they're tricky and they'll say, look at the vacancies in New York. Excuse me, New York is a huge state. 95% of the state is fucking empty. Show me the vacancies in New York City. Okay, you can even do all of New York City. You do all the boroughs. I don't give a fuck. Vacancy rate for New York City is very low. New York State might be higher, but
it's people. I mean, there is a lot of excess housing and space in the city that is being held in private hands,
okay,
so
great.
that they can maximize their profits.
Let's say we do all that, but we're talking here very specifically. The New York City is going to have to build housing that is affordable. We know, there are studies on...
Oh, fuck. I don't know if he's as familiar individually with this. He would be, I would imagine, but...
This, you can read them. You can go talk to developers. The reporting on this is, very straightforward. We know that when you trigger the public rules, it ends up being extremely...
Yeah, Flova. Yeah, I know. I know this from talking to Dan, but I don't want to get into that. But yeah, cap rates of property... Of a property, the value of a commercial property is directly tied to the amount of money it generates. And if you start lowering rents, the valuation of the property goes down. Or, I'm sorry, that had to do with the thing I was saying earlier. But this is true even if you buy residential property, you rent it out to people too. When people are investing in residential property to rent, as in the form of being a landlord or whatever, you're doing this on the expectation that you're going to have a cash flow tied to it, like somebody renting the property. Not that you're just buying something and sitting on it and waiting for it to appreciate. It still costs money to maintain. It's just, this is stupid. This is an EV, not EV negative. This is an NPV negative investment. You're better off just throwing your money in the stock market at that point.
This is very straightforward. We know that when you trigger the public rules, it ends up being extremely, extremely expensive. We know that, like in San Francisco, where they would try to build a public toilet for almost $2 million, they do that here too. Why does it cost so much, and why does it so often fail when government tries to achieve the things we both want it to do?
I think property has been so commodified that there is such a profit incentive, such a money incentive to slow that roll.
Like, just think about what you're saying here. Yes, in a way, I mean, it is commodified. You buy things and you sell things and you consume them. Housing is a thing that you consume, by the way. But that's true of everybody that buys houses, not just corporate interests. And if it was corporate interests that were commodifying these things and wanted to make money off of them, wouldn't they want more of it so they could make more money off of it? Wouldn't that be the goal? Like, if let's say that you can make money off of owning property, wouldn't they say like, hey, can you guys own more so we can make even more money off of it? Like, this is such a thoughtless, brain dead thing to say, oh, it's the commodification. Commodification implies somebody is making money off of it. So wouldn't you want to commodify more of it to make more money off of more of these things? Like, if we thought that pharmaceutical companies, if we thought that hospitals were for profit and were just greedy capitalists, and then we use the same logic, then there would only be one hospital or one pharmacy or one drug, right? Oh, it's commodified. So of course they're not going to open any more hospitals. They just want to have the one hospital with the really expensive beds. No, they would open more hospitals and charge more money to more patients. No, like,
so commodified that there is such a profit incentive, such a money incentive
to keep
them slow
empty?
that roll, that it creates a whole litany. There's an everything.
We're talking about
there's an
projects that are
everything bagel.
We're talking about projects
of,
that are past that point. Like, I think that, let me be really.
Is he saying land developers are making artificial scarcity for higher profits? He's saying that corporate interests or billionaires or something are buying up all the property and that they want to keep all of the property empty because it benefits them because the value appreciates, this is a brainless, thoughtless. This is instantly defeated by knowing like anything at all about investing or real estate. And it's just the most thoughtless thing in the universe to say.
everything bagel.
We're talking about projects
of,
that are past that point. Like, I think that, let me be really meta clear here on what I'm trying to do.
Clear.
Because I think you keep wanting to pull it back to where we can, let's totally premise corporations are terrible, they are bad, they're like they are your enemy. Hold on,
they have
there are
their
cases,
agenda,
sure,
and we have ours.
Yes, there are cases where the government is building affordable housing on land they own or they have already bought, or they are funding somebody else to build it, that is already nonprofit housing. This is just like, it's not being done for profit. We are not in a commodified system. We know that housing costs more than the commodity.
Empty land still costs taxes, right? Yes, nobody buys empty land and sits on empty land and doesn't use it or improve it to make money. This is like the lefty. It's a lefty delusion that to explain issues with housing, where the idea is corporations are buying up all the property and they're not even doing anything with it, and that's why nobody can afford to live anywhere. It's because corporate interests have bought up all the property, and now and they're just sitting on it doing nothing with it. This is stupid. Why would you do this? why would you fuck yourself over so much? Like, it's just dumb.
Modified housing costs to build. It is fine to say that it costs more. This is a totally reasonable interpretation. That is because wealthy landowners and wealthy corporations have colluded, maybe with other figures, on rules that have made it cost more. But which of these are you going to pull apart, right? This is the trade-off.
Like, he's preaching to me and only me. If you think there are issues related to the markets, well, what are the issues you want to talk about? And there are, by the way. There's that big lawsuit of some rental program or whatever that the claim is, at least, is that there's a bunch of collusion going on with renters to keep rents artificially high by colluding on price, which they shouldn't be doing. That's a bad thing, and they should get rid of that. If assuming all the claims made in that lawsuit are true, that would be a good thing that you could target to get rid of. That would be bad. You should get rid of that thing.
So we are trying to force people to confront in abundance. You have to go into this thing and say, this is not working. I need to make it cheaper, faster, more achievable. Like, when you can't make the corporation your villain, what are you doing? Like, how do you approach?
Well, it's not a question of making the, well, first off, I think as a political matter, making the corporations a villain is going to be far more, you're going to have a far broader support than making environmental groups or people seeking equity in housing the villain.
That's fine, but
okay. But then I
walk me
would
through
say
the actual problem here.
Well, and then I would say the problem again is that we have so greatly commodified housing. There is such a profit incentive to create these barriers. I know how they exist today.
Like, I wish Ezra, I don't know if Ezra's not a pro debater, or maybe he doesn't care as much about this point, or maybe he hasn't thought as much about this point. But like when you say we have made housing such a commodity and we need to do something about that, Sam needs to state clearly what you're talking about is against the interests of every single family, individual person that owns a home. You want to go counter to their interests, which, by the way, that could be a position you take. It could even be a defensible one. You could say, fuck it, I think all housing should be public owned and only the government should do all housing. There's a whole list of other issues that you run into. But like that could be a position. But at the very least, you need to acknowledge that the position you're taking is going to hurt every single homeowner in the United States, right?
But the idea of unwinding it, you're just like, the whole book is about the idea that what was good intention 25 years ago, 40 years ago, has now brought us this problem. It seems to me that there's an attempt to restart that cycle.
I don't think that you can say, I really want to push you here. I don't think you can say that the reason it costs more money and is so much more difficult and is so much slower to build nonprofit affordable housing than to build market rate housing is because we've over commodified housing. I just don't, or that Texas is better at building housing because they have somehow decommodified housing.
Yeah, what is that?
California.
Yes. Good contrapositive, right? So are you saying that Texas, so you're saying that the commodification of housing is what's making it so expensive? So that means that, what, did Texas decommodify housing? Or is it less commodified in Texas? Yes.
More space. They simply have more
plenty of space. If you go to San Jose, man, there is plenty of space. It's strip malls and single-family homes.
Yep.
It is one of the richest tracts of land in the whole country.
This is true of all of Southern California, by the way. I remember looking out the window of my Glendale apartment and seeing across where I lived, it's just rows and rows and rows and blocks and blocks and blocks of all single-family homes. So when I lived here, all of these areas here, these are just single family homes. All of these. I think I lived in this apartment complex. All of these. All of this single family homes, all of it. Oh my, and these are dog shit homes. They're dog shit homes and they sell for like $900K a pop. It's so gross. It's so gross. Hold shift and left click to change the camera angle. Hold shift and left click. Hold shift. What? Does that like take me to street view? Great. Now I'm inside and I can't see shit. Thanks.
In the whole world, it could be skyscrapers. It could be Shenzhen. It is strip malls and single family homes. We have
living in an apartment as a normie fucking sucks. That's an American take. All right. That's just an American take. And then the next thing in chat is Destiny. Do Americans just hate apartment complexes? Why not just get an apartment? Because Americans think that apartments are a signifier of poverty. If you're an American and somebody lives in an apartment, you think that you're poor. That's what Americans associate apartments with.
Skyscrapers, it could be Shenzhen. It is strip malls and single family homes. We have plenty of space in California.
I mean, I can't speak to San Jose.
Oh my God.
Silicon Valley is what I'm talking about. Like, you go ride around where these fucking venture capital firms, man, I promise you will not leave that drive saying there is nowhere to build a 6-story apartment building.
And do we have public transport there? Like, how are these homeless people?
We would if we could build it.
You're not going to have public transit in areas that are highly suburban because it's just not dense enough for it. It wouldn't make any sense. The routes would suck. It'd be too expensive. Not enough people would use it to justify the cost. Like,
that was part of what high-speed rail is supposed to be doing, which is why I'm so rip shit that it didn't happen.
And whose tax base is going to pay for that public transport in those buildings there? I mean, that's the point.
It was our tax base. I was one of the taxpayers.
I mean,
I am saying that I don't think it is plausible to say that the reason you can't build in like San Jose and you can in Texas is that we've decommodified in Texas. We just haven't.
Well, we have plenty of space in the desert too. But the point is that,
first of all of Southern California is a desert. Okay, number one. All right. Number two, he's not just talking about places out in the middle of nowhere. Like, all of these major cities are inundated with single family home zoning. And for the apartment complexes, you can't build them over 5 stories tall.
how are we going to? I'm talking about the places where you guys specifically make the point that New York City, San Francisco, these places are, where people should be living and creating. And from my perspective in New York, having, lived here more or less for 30 some odd years, 35 years, this place got a lot more expensive, not because there were constraints on zoning, not because there was equity. There hasn't been this place got more expensive.
I'm pro equity. I believe what I'm doing will create a whole lot more equity because you need to make the affordable housing. But in the book, if you've listened to it, I have a whole section critiquing Michael Bloomberg for this whole concept that New York City should be a luxury good. This is a whole section of the book that it is a incredible mistake that a lot of Democrats made along the way to sort of get into this idea that cities are like a penthouse for the upper class.
Yes, and I would suggest. Look, there was a. This just came out a report by the Fed, UCLA, that specifically addressed the question of whether it was housing constraints. California Federal Reserve researchers found that constrained housing supply is relatively unimportant in explaining the differences in rising house prices among U.S. cities.
Have you read the debate on this report?
No. I haven't. It said higher income growth predicts the same growth. Okay, well, it's controversial. I'm willing to accept that.
I don't believe that it's controversial in economics right now that boosting the housing supply is the number one way to alleviate prices. I don't think there's any controversy in this. This has been studied all across Europe. There was a big study that came out a couple months ago or a few weeks ago that did another rent control analysis in, I don't remember if it was Germany or Denmark or a specific city in one of those two. But this has just it's been studied to death. The thing is just nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to actually build more homes. They just want to do all of these weird nibbling around the edges policies and assume that that's going to fix everything when it doesn't do fuck all. But
on some basic
level, right? If you have enough, things follow supply and demand. If you have enough of something, if you have too much of something, the price of it is going to fall, right? To argue that higher incomes, and this again, I think in a weird way we would agree on this. Higher incomes are going to be a causal factor in restrictive zoning and building policies because people get higher incomes, they buy a house, that house becomes a major asset for them. And again, this is all in the book. The way they can protect the value of that asset is by making it impossible for 100%. Other people to live in near them. They are creating their own scarcity.
Yes.
And so again, when I hear this book is not about power, to me, this book is all about power.
Well, but I still can't get an answer as to what is the primary. If we're talking from a national perspective, right? Across the country, this is going to be a message. You just visited the Senate caucus to talk about this. Derek was talking about. There's a fight. It's happening right now. Our book is trying to win a certain intra-left coalitional fight about defining the future of liberalism in the Democratic Party. If this fight's going on and this is part of a movement, there's a lot of money behind it.
Is he really?
I can't remember the organization.
Making
probably
this, he's going to make this accusation.
$120 million, citing the abundance movement.
Oh my God!
There's a lot of money behind this.
Oh my God!
What is the? I know that there are granular problems in each of these.
This is the peak, and it's sad too because Sam is a smart guy. He's smarter than this. Sam is smarter than this. This is showing you peak ideological brain rot. That Sam's dismissal of abundance is done on the grounds that abundance is refusing to criticize the billionaires. It must be because the billionaires have bought abundance as well. This becomes a what would be like a circularly defined, like you're like every single thing. It's that idea of a transcendental concept that's controlling for everything. Oh, the deep state is doing this. Really? Well, here's evidence that the deep state's not doing that. Well, if there's evidence that the deep state isn't doing it, it's because the deep state released that evidence. Wait, what? Okay, well, there's no evidence that the deep state's doing that thing. Oh, well, if there's no evidence that the deep state's doing that thing, then it's because the deep state has withheld that evidence. Oh. Well, in that case, I guess no matter what I say or do, you're always, yes. Okay, gotcha.
Different cities, but do you think if there is a villain, and I imagine that there's, a good movement always needs a villain, what is the villain? Is it just we have overly restrictive zoning, and
I think you and I probably actually disagree that good movements are built on clear villains. But let me try to give you a good answer to this question. We didn't think the intra-left argument was with you. Just to be real.
Yeah, because he makes the same. This is a mistake that I made too, because I kind of assumed that I had assumed a long time ago. Sam Seder's like pretty smart. He's just surrounded by a bunch of fucking lunatics on his show, but it's hard to tell sometimes. I can't tell if Sam's been more captured by these people, or maybe he always was like more to the left than I was able to perceive, I guess. I don't know.
Really blunt about it. I thought the neo-Brandeisians, etc.
I don't know if I'm necessarily a neo-Brandeisian, but okay.
You may not be, but they've been very critical of it. We thought the intra-left argument had to do much more with a debate that is very live. Again, it's a sort of New Deal, New Left divide to us between is the right future organizing government to organize the resources of society to create this kind of plentitude of housing, of energy, of infrastructure, these things that we want, of innovation, which is a big part of the book? Or is it more of a small is beautiful future? Is it more degrowth inflected? Is it more that we actually build too much already? Is it that there isn't enough meaning?
What do leftists want that is better than abundance? It is literally anti-Reagan, closest to them among other liberal proposals, and is conceding a lot of points to them. Leftists just want socialism. That's it. And anything that's like a patch to capitalism or a band-aid on capitalism, they don't like. That's all they view it as. It's as simple as that, unfortunately.
And things. In a weird way, Donald Trump has begun to really embody this other side when he comes out and he says, maybe the kids have too many dolls, right? You got 30 dolls, maybe you only need 2. You got 30 pencils, maybe you only need 5. So our view was not that the sort of fight that was live here was with people who worry about corporate power. It's that if you come from the places I come from, or frankly that you live in now and I live in now, you see a lot of Democrats who show up at the planning meeting and don't want any affordable housing because they don't want it to change their housing values. Yeah, you see a lot of people using all sorts of tools of delay in all sorts of directions to stop things from happening. And to us, like I think one of the really profound fights is, do you think delay as a omnipresent tool of governance is a virtue, or do you think speed is more of a virtue? And if you think speed is a virtue, as I do, I think we should deliver government services much faster. Then what sort of moves are you willing to make that true?
I'm confused. What? You were surprised that your fight your fight was with the neo-Brandeisians. Who did you think who did you think the fight was? Like you talk,
there's a big schism in the environmental movement and the environmental community between the side that thinks we need to build our way towards decarbonization and the side that is much more about worrying that when we build things, we're going to change environments. We're using things like the California Environmental Quality Act or the National Environmental Policy Act to stop things that might.
What would their movement? I'm trying to figure out who you're talking about. Like degrowthers?
If you follow or report on any part of the decarbonization fight, you will find that the entire architecture of environmental policy we have is being mobilized against it in order to sue it out of existence, sometimes by moneyed interests. But there was a point in time when like a chapter of the Sunrise Movement, I think it was in Mass, signed on to a solar moratorium. There is a lot of conflict among people who see themselves as liberals committed to these goals, etc., on whether building is good or bad. I think that if you're looking very skeptically, but what do you think NIMBYs are?
Well, I think NIMBYs, for the most part, are wealth are wealthy people.
Great. That's
Well, no, it's any. Ezra shouldn't grant that. It's anybody that owns a home. It's not just wealthy people, right? Regardless of how you feel about gentrification, being anti-gentrification is a form of NIMBYism.
Are wealthy people.
great. That's a big part of the fight we thought we were about to have.
The Kennedys,
Yeah, it's not-
Yes.
stop the windmills.
So now you're making my argument for me. Come on, do it. Give it to me here.
No. But when I look at the common strain through those people and their ability to actually impact policy, I see money.
Okay, but so you look at one strain, and I probably have a broader set. So let me give
what's
you one
broader
where we will,
than that?
Let me give you one where we will disagree.
Wait, what is broader than that?
Because it's not just the Kennedys. It's not just the people you're
I know it's
comfortable
not
with.
just the Kennedys, but I'm talking wherever those NIMBYs succeed, I am willing to bet that the relationship between how much money they have and the YIMBYs have, the NIMBYs far more often than not will have more money. I mean, this is like, I know you know the research on this. Like when these are contested, there's no doubt in my mind that we have regulations but it's to protect people's assets and people who have assets versus people who don't have assets. And so like that is I don't know how you generalize it more than that.
So I think on the NIMBY side, we largely agree, right? And so when I say that we thought there were different obvious sources of opposition, that was a big one. And again, as you know, there's a whole section of the book about how destructive it has been to turn housing into the central asset class and wealth engine for the middle to upper middle class, right? It's not true for the very wealthy, but that's a thing people know. But here's a place where we probably disagree. In California, where I'm more familiar with the politics, the California Environmental Quality Act, which I think most people agree has overgrown its initial design and is being used to do things like try to stop UC Berkeley from expanding dormitoriums because more students are environmental nuisance. One thing that really defends it is that there's a coalition of unions that use CEQA to sue development in order to get unrelated labor standards concessions. And to me, that is a misuse of power. I am pro stronger labor standards. I am not pro radically expanding how much you can delay every single project in order to get concessions that were not in the initial architecture or vision of that bill. So yes, there is power. The NIMBYs are power and the NIMBYs are related to money, but power is also misused by groups I feel more allied with. And that's one utility of focusing on blue states for me.
I gave you money. Let's trade them in disagreements. Let me at least finish that video. Jesus.
We had a union problem in the context of Medicare for all in that fight. Yep. I mean, there's I think you can find that across a ton of different issues, and you'll have unions on different sides of the same issue because they're
carpenters and builder trades are very different in California.
But I think we both agree that the net value of a strong union movement is a positive. And actually, like a lot of problems we have in terms of across the board are a function of the deunionization of the country. So there's no doubt, like we can find specific instances, and I sort of feel like that's, I think, part of what I have as a critique of the book. There are particular instances, but broadly speaking, when we're talking about coalitional politics, which is definitionally democratic politics, to move forward and to have power and to actually get things done, it seems to me you can't do it by diminishing the coalition.
So there we genuinely disagree.
Yes.
Like that is truly like I always want to be very honest about points of disagreement. There are places where I think we are actually aligned, and here I think Democrats have become way over coalitional, and I think it is a huge problem that we are not delivering.
Which parts of the coalition do you think should be jettisoned?
I don't ever talk about it in terms of jettisoning.
Jettison
because I don't think
them,
that's
do
how
it.
coalitions work. I think they just
Talk
change issue
about it.
to issue.
Oh.
But I do not think we should have such a level of proceduralism that forces this many giveaways to this many interests in every process. And again,
fucking yeah, and he wants God, yes.
to use an example where I think we would probably be
Can you
more
be specific about the interests? Are there interests that go across the board? I mean, that's what I keep trying to get at. Is that like everything is specific?
You keep trying. I think my virtue is specificity, and your critique of me is I'm overly specific. Mine of you is you're overly general.
I'm saying like you're specific about the granular instances, but you say we need to have less interests, and I want to know who those interests are that we need to have less of.
I want to have. Let me go back to the Medicare example for a minute because you brought that up, and I think it's a good one. We passed Medicare, sent out those cards in a year. When the Biden administration did two things I think we both probably liked, which is prescription drug negotiations and limiting out-of-pocket lifetime caps, or having lifetime caps for out-of-pocket costs. It took them 3 to 4 years to move it through a regulatory process that we have expanded with things like notice and comment periods and more opportunities for judicial review that can be utilized by, in this case, pharmaceutical companies, but others as well, to kind of slow everything down and force a lot of concession. I want to break that process and make it much more under agency discretion, what they do, and make it harder to challenge. In that case, that's going to hurt pharmaceutical companies, right? So I think that you and I would like it. In the California housing case, I want to make housing construction much closer to by right? I want you to have the right to build the housing you want to build, assuming it conforms to basic standards. This is what we've done in California for ADUs. It worked really, really well. A lot of people will be mad about that. NIMBYs, certain unions, etc. I would like to make it easier to build modular housing. Again, different people will be mad at that. I don't have one answer for you on who I'm trying to screw over because I'm not trying to screw anybody over. What I'm trying to do is focus liberal governance on the outcomes it is promising people and get people to confront why we are failing to deliver them. If you end up with a different answer than me, that's great. But that should be a very granular confrontation with why high-speed rail didn't happen, why the Second Avenue subway is so fucking expensive, why we're not building enough housing. I don't believe you can do this in generalities in the way that I think a lot of people want to. I think that it requires a lot of confrontation with the individual failures we see and then trying to figure out, okay, do things rhyme across these failures? Is there a level of government that should have the authority that currently does it? That kind of thing.
All right. Now, I've held you really long, and so I want to, but let me just.
Yeah.
So what is then the political, like, what do we organize around as a political movement? If it is in these various instances, people are going to get situationally marginalized in the process, right? I mean, or however gently you want to say. Your interests here, we're going to ignore in these specific cases. What is the political message that's going to resonate and get these different factions of the Democratic Party on board with this as a broad message?
I think every national politician who succeeds tends to be reformist and highly critical of the era of their party that came right before them. Bill Clinton.
Did you watch the J-Reg political comments video? No, it might be good, it might not be. The big issue that I have with J-Reg is that a lot of his stuff seems to kind of just be like super irony without any actual purpose or direction, and it's just kind of like pointless meanings. And just not as much. I mean, like, it's like kind of funny, but if there's not much of a point behind it, then I just like, maybe this one's good. I'm not sure.
Was very critical of the Democratic Party preceding him, sort of New Democrat, etc. Barack Obama was extremely critical of both the way money acted in politics prior to him. You might disagree about his actual administration, and then the Iraq War. Donald Trump was extremely critical of the pre-Donald Trump Republican Party. I think being honest with people.
How do you feel about Florida banning fluoride from the drinking water? It's retarded, but Republicans are retarded, so what are you going to say?
Extremely critical of the pre-Donald Trump Republican Party. I think being honest with people that you have noticed the same failures on your side that they have is a very potent politics. Now, I am not a politician. I don't have to win elections. I have a freedom to say things that I think are true, that maybe Pete Buttigieg and Wes Moore and Gretchen Whitmer and whoever don't. So I don't necessarily come here telling you I know how to win elections. I don't think you should believe me or really anybody else who doesn't routinely win elections if they tell you that. But the idea that pointing out, yeah, we fucked up. Yeah, things are moving too slow. Yeah, you don't feel the government is spending your money well. I thought it was incredibly telling that when the New York Times polled this just a couple weeks ago, what you found when you polled people, like, is government inefficient? Plus 18. Is Doge a good idea? Plus 6. Is Doge doing a good job? Minus some significant number. Is Elon Musk doing a good job? Like minus 18 or 20. People believe, often correctly, that government doesn't deliver for them, that it's not spending their money well, that they're not getting what they want out of it. And I think going to them in the first order and saying, yeah, I am going to be relentlessly focused on making sure the roads I promised to fix for you actually get fucking fixed this time. We are actually going to build. We learned something about California high-speed rail, and the next time we do one of these big projects, here's what we learned, and here's how we are going to make it work. I could be wrong. I think it's a potent politics.
Which of the 3 Democratic presidencies that we've lived under would you rate the highest in terms of your policy set, in terms of accomplishing it?
Obama, but there's things you need to learn from that one too.
Hold on.
And that's a function of the ACA?
A function of the ACA, I think they got a lot done that was very valuable, but I will always say that part of my thinking goes back to that era, because you go back to the 2009 stimulus bill, and what does it promise? Whether it's big headline projects that are going to be the reinvestment side, it's high-speed rail, it's a national set of interoperable health records, and it's a national smart grid, and we are 0 for 3.
I would also argue they screwed up on the housing crisis immensely. And under Obama, we lost, 1,000 statewide Democrats, which is why I think we had such a poor bench over in the following 10 years. Some comptroller loses their job because of the wave. I'm not convinced that we didn't get Trump as a function of Obama.
I think a full debate between us on Obama should wait for another day. That would be
a different day. But Ezra, I really appreciate you taking the time, and we will link to Abundance and, of course, your podcast, huge podcast, and the New York Times is also a well-known newspaper.
I've heard of it. Yeah, a strong Northeast regional. Thank you, Sam. I enjoyed it.
All right, thanks, Ezra. All right, folks.
What a boring conversation. I wonder if Ezra thought he was going to get way more wonky or policy-focused arguments about this. Let me use the restroom. Hold on one second. Jesus.